The last spark. The abandoned lunar facility was never meant to be a tomb. Commander Alara Chen stared at the holographic display, watching the red dots of the Voidborne scout ships closing in on her position. The facility's emergency lighting cast long shadows across her weathered face. At 45, she had spent over half her life hiding, surviving, and waiting for a chance that had never come. Until now. Security breach in Sectors 7 through 9, announced the facility's AI in its maddeningly calm voice. Estimated time to complete perimeter compromise, 17 minutes. Alara's fingers danced across the control panel, initiating lockdown protocols that would buy her precious minutes. The lunar dust that had accumulated on the console rose in small clouds with each tap of her fingers. No one had been here for decades, not since the fall of Earth. Arcturus, show me Project Prometheus again, she commanded, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The holographic display shifted, replacing the approaching enemy ships with schematics for a device unlike anything humanity had ever created. Even after spending 3 months deciphering the data, Alara still couldn't fully comprehend what she was looking at. The scientists who had designed it had been brilliant, perhaps too brilliant for their own good. Project Prometheus, began Arcturus, the facility's eye. Classification: Omega. Purpose: manipulation of quantum probability fields to alter fundamental cosmic constants within a localized area. Alara narrowed her eyes. In simple terms, old friend, it changes reality, Commander. 30 years ago, humanity had thought itself ready for the cosmos. Earth's nations had unified after centuries of conflict, and together they had reached out to the stars. The first alien contact had been celebrated worldwide as the dawn of a new era. No one had expected the slaughter that followed. The Voidborne Collective had appeared without warning, their massive ships darkening skies across the planet. Humanity fought bravely, desperately, but their weapons had barely scratched the invaders' ships. Within weeks, Earth's major cities lay in ruins. Within months, human civilization had collapsed. Those who weren't killed were enslaved, shipped off to distant worlds to work in the collective's mines. Alara had been a young cadet then, assigned to this secret lunar facility as part of her training rotation. She had watched, helpless, as Earth burned. When the order came to evacuate, something had malfunctioned. Her escape pod never launched. Instead, she remained trapped, alone except for Arcturus, the facility's eye companion. For 30 years, she had survived on recycled air and hydroponically grown food, maintaining the facility's systems and studying its secrets. It was only 3 months ago that she had discovered the hidden vault containing Project Prometheus. Commander, I must inform you that the Voidborne ships have deployed landing craft, Arcturus reported. They will breach the facility in approximately 12 minutes. Alara nodded, her decision already made. She had nothing to lose. The device before her was humanity's last hope, possibly its last legacy. She began the activation sequence. Arcturus, compile all data on Project Prometheus and compress it into a quantum-encrypted package. If I fail, transmit it on the emergency frequency. The emergency frequency has been dormant for 27 years, Commander. There is no indication that anyone is still listening. Just do it. Alara snapped, her fingers flying over the controls. The massive device in the center of the chamber began to hum, its components shifting and realigning as power flowed through systems that had lain dormant for decades. Project Prometheus resembled a metallic lotus flower, its petals now unfurling to reveal a pulsing blue core. Alara couldn't help but marvel at its beauty, even as alarms blared around her. Warning, Arcturus announced. Project Prometheus was never fully tested. Simulations indicate a 78.4% chance of catastrophic failure. Alara laughed bitterly. And what happens in the other 21.6%? There was a pause, unusual for the AI. Unknown. The facility shuddered as something struck it from outside. The Voidborne were breaking in. Alara took a deep breath and initiated the final sequence. For Earth, she whispered. The device's blue core pulsed once, twice, then erupted in a brilliant flash that consumed the chamber. Alara felt herself torn apart and reassembled in an instant, her consciousness expanding beyond her body, beyond the facility, beyond the moon itself. For one breathtaking moment, she could see everything. The Earth, scared but enduring. The void-born ships, their hulls gleaming with malevolent purpose. And something else, something vast and ancient watching from the spaces between stars. Then reality snapped back into focus, and Alara found herself still standing before the device. But something had changed. The facility's alarms had fallen silent. The red dots representing the void-born ships had vanished from the display. Arcturus, she called out, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. What happened? No response came from the AI. Instead, a new voice filled the chamber, melodic, layered, as if several beings were speaking in perfect harmony. You have awakened what should have remained dormant, human. Alara spun around, her hand instinctively reaching for the weapon at her hip. In the doorway stood a figure that defied description, neither fully solid nor completely ethereal, its form shifting between states of matter like water flowing over rocks. Who are you? Alara demanded. What are you? The figure moved closer, its movements too fluid to be natural. We are the Meridian. We watch the boundaries between realities. And you, Commander Alara Chen, have just torn a hole through one. Alara glanced at the Prometheus device, still pulsing with energy. This was designed to alter local reality, not break it. The beam made a sound that might have been laughter. Your scientists understood less than they thought. Project Prometheus doesn't just change reality. It creates new ones. The moment you activated it, you created a cascade effect that has rippled across the cosmos. Fear gripped Alara's heart. I've done something terrible, haven't I? Terrible. Perhaps. Remarkable. Certainly. The Meridian moved around the chamber, studying the facility with what seemed like curiosity. For 30,000 years, we have watched the races of this galaxy rise and fall. The Voidborn Collective has consumed hundreds of civilizations before yours. None has ever done what you just did. And what exactly did I do? The Meridian's form shimmered. You've created a junction point, a place where multiple realities intersect. From this point, changes can propagate outward, altering the past, present, and future simultaneously. Alara's mind reeled. That's impossible. Yet you have done it, the Meridian replied. The question now is, what will you do with this power? Before Alara could respond, the facility's systems suddenly came back online. Displays flickered to life, showing the space around the moon. The Voidborn ships were still there, but they were no longer approaching. Instead, they seemed frozen in place. I've paused them, temporarily, the Meridian explained. Time flows differently, at a junction point, but they will break free eventually. The Voidborn have encountered junction points before. It is why they are so powerful. They've learned to harness reality itself. Alara studied the ships on the display. For 30 years, she had dreamed of revenge, of finding some way to strike back at the beings who had destroyed her world. Now, impossibly, she had the means. Can I use this to save Earth, to undo what they did? The Meridian's form darkened. The past cannot be undone without consequences. Change one thread, and the entire tapestry may unravel. But the future can be rewritten. The Lara turned back to the Prometheus device, its blue light pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Then teach me. Show me how to use this. Are you certain? The power to reshape reality comes with a price. The Voidborn will sense what you've done. They will come with everything they have to stop you. Alara thought of Earth, of the billions who had died, of the millions still enslaved across the galaxy. She thought of the human spirit, resilient, resourceful, defiant until the end. Let them come, she said, her voice hardening with resolve. They thought humanity was defeated. They're about to learn how wrong they were. The Meridian's form seemed to smile, though it had no distinguishable face. "Very well, Commander. Let us begin." As the being approached the Prometheus device, the blue light intensified, filling the chamber with its radiance. Outside, the earth hung in the void, a silent witness to the beginning of humanity's resurrection. In that moment, Alara understood what she had truly discovered, not just a weapon or a tool, but a second chance. The Voidborn had crushed humanity once, but they had made a fatal mistake. They had left a single spark alive. And from that spark, a new fire would rise. "The first lesson," said the Meridian, "is understanding that reality is not fixed. It is malleable, responsive to belief and intention. Your species has always sensed this intuitively. It is why you tell stories, why you imagine worlds that do not exist." "You mean we've always had this ability?" Alara asked, watching as the device's components realigned themselves under the Meridian's influence. "In a limited way, yes. Human consciousness has unique properties we have observed in no other species. You change reality simply by observing it. Project Prometheus merely amplifies that natural ability to a cosmic scale." Alara placed her hand near the device's core, feeling its energy pulse through her. The power was intoxicating, terrifying in its implications. "The Voidborn will detect the junction point soon," the Meridian warned. "We must prepare you for what comes next." Outside the facility, the frozen Voidborn ships began to twitch, struggling against their temporal prison. The clock was ticking. Humanity's last stand was about to begin. Reshaping reality. 3 days passed in a blur of learning and preparation. Under the Meridian's guidance, Alara had begun to understand the true nature of Project Prometheus. The device was not just a tool, it was a conduit, channeling the innate human ability to imagine and create into a force that could reshape the fabric of reality itself. "The final ships have arrived," Arcturus announced, its systems now fully integrated with the Prometheus device. The AI had evolved, becoming something more than its original programming. Voidborn fleet count, 73 capital ships, approximately 300 smaller vessels. Alara stood at the viewport, watching as the massive black ships positioned themselves around Earth and the Moon. The largest of them, a behemoth that stretched nearly 20 kilometers from end to end, had taken up position directly above the lunar facility. That would be the Voidborn command vessel, where the collective's overseers directed their forces. "They know exactly what we have," she said quietly. The Meridian's form shimmered beside her. "Yes, they have encountered junction points before. It is how they rose to power, how they conquered so many worlds. But they have never faced a junction point controlled by a human." "What makes humans different?" Alara had asked this question repeatedly over the past days, and each time the Meridian's answer had been enigmatic, incomplete. This time, the being seemed ready to reveal more. "Your species possesses something we call divergent cognition, the ability to imagine what is not, to conceive of alternatives to reality. Most sentient species are bound by logical progression, by what is possible within the rules they understand. Humans dream beyond those limitations." "That doesn't sound like a superpower," Alara observed, checking the facility's defenses one last time. The shields were holding, but they wouldn't last long against a concentrated Voidborn assault. "It is the greatest power in the cosmos," the Meridian replied. "Reality responds to consciousness. Your scientists glimpsed this truth at the quantum level, but failed to grasp its implications. The universe is, in essence, a consensus reality shaped by the dominant consciousness within it. And the Voidborn have been the dominant consciousness. Until now." A warning klaxon shattered the moment. On the displays, the massive Voidborn command ship had begun to emit a pulsing energy signature that distorted the space around it. "They're preparing to fire their main weapon," Arcturus reported. "Impact in 47 seconds." Alara moved swiftly to the Prometheus device, placing her hands on its control interface. The past 3 days had taught her to feel the currents of reality flowing through the junction point, to sense the possibilities branching outward from each moment. Remember, the Meridian cautioned, direct confrontation is not your advantage. The Voidborn have superior numbers and firepower. I'm not planning to fight them, Elara replied, a plan forming in her mind. I'm going to change the game. She closed her eyes, focusing on the junction point's energy. The Prometheus device hummed beneath her fingers, responding to her intention. In her mind, she pictured not a weapon but a signal, a message spreading outward through subspace, reaching every corner of the galaxy. 30 seconds to impact, Arcturus warned. Elara pushed harder, channeling more energy into the junction point. The facility trembled as reality fluctuated around them. Outside, the stars seemed to blur and shift as if viewed through rippling water. "What are you doing?" the Meridian asked, its form flickering with what might have been concern. "The Voidborn didn't just conquer Earth," Elara explained, her voice strained with concentration. "They've enslaved hundreds of species across the galaxy. All of those beings want freedom. They just need a catalyst, a signal to rise up simultaneously." Understanding dawned in the Meridian's multifaceted consciousness. "You're creating a quantum-entangled communication network, bypassing traditional subspace channels. The largest rebellion in galactic history," Elara confirmed. "All happening at exactly the same moment." 10 seconds to impact, Arcturus announced. Elara opened her eyes, which now glowed with the same blue energy as the Prometheus device. And now for step 2. She shifted her focus, picturing the space around the lunar facility. In her mind, she folded it, creating a bubble of altered reality where conventional physics no longer applied. The Voidborn weapon relied on specific cosmic constants to function, constants she was about to change. "Impact imminent," Arcturus reported. A beam of concentrated dark energy lanced from the Voidborn command ship toward the lunar facility. It struck the bubble of altered reality and dispersed, like light scattering in water. The devastating weapon that had shattered planets was rendered harmless. On the command ship's bridge, Supreme Overseer Kalvaruk watched in disbelief as their primary weapon failed to penetrate the human facility's defenses. In 3,000 years of conquest, nothing had ever survived a direct hit from a void lance. "Impossible," he hissed, his multiple eyes narrowing. "Recalibrate and fire again." His subordinates rushed to comply, but before they could, their communication systems erupted with urgent messages. Reports flooding in from across the galaxy, simultaneous uprisings on every Voidborn-controlled world, their enslaved populations suddenly coordinating with impossible precision. Back on the lunar facility, Elara allowed herself a grim smile as she monitored the chaos spreading throughout the Voidborn Empire. It's working. Their forces are being pulled away to deal with rebellions everywhere at once. The Meridian observed with what appeared to be admiration. "You have weaponized hope, Commander Chen." Impressive. But the victory was far from complete. On the displays, the Voidborn command ship was repositioning, preparing for a more conventional assault. Dozens of smaller vessels detached from the fleet, heading directly for the lunar facility. "They're deploying boarding parties," Arcturus warned. Estimated time to breach: 3 minutes. Elara had anticipated this. The Voidborn would want to capture the junction point intact, to add its power to their own. They wouldn't risk destroying it outright. "Time for the next phase," she said, adjusting the Prometheus device. "Arcturus, initiate Protocol Lazarus." Protocol Lazarus initiated, the AI confirmed. Activating dormant systems. Across Earth, in the ruins of humanity's cities, something stirred. 30 years ago, when the Voidborn attacked, humanity's final defensive measure had been deployed. Billions of nanomachines designed to rebuild from the ashes. They had lain dormant, gathering solar energy, replicating slowly, waiting for activation. Now they awoke, flowing together like mercury to form humanoid shapes. An army was rising from Earth's dust, constructed from the very technology the Voidborn had tried to destroy. Nanofabricated defense units online, Arcturus reported. Current count, 17 million and rising. The Meridian's form pulsed with surprise. Your species prepared for this possibility. We've always been good at planning for the worst, Alara replied. These units were designed to rebuild our civilization. I'm just repurposing them. The first void-born boarding parties breached the facility's outer defenses. They moved with the confidence of conquerors who had never known defeat, their biomechanical bodies adapted for combat in every environment. What they weren't prepared for was the human waiting for them. Alara stood alone in the central chamber, the Prometheus device pulsing behind her. As the first void-born warriors entered, they hesitated, sensing something had changed. The human before them was not cowering in fear. She was smiling. "Welcome to humanity's second act," she said. The junction point flared, and reality seemed to bend around her. The void-born warriors found themselves suddenly heavier, their movements sluggish as if moving through liquid. Alara, meanwhile, moved with unnatural speed, her perception of time altered by the junction point's influence. The fight was brief and decisive. The Voidborn, for all their technological superiority, had never faced an opponent who could alter the fundamental laws of physics within a localized area. Their weapons misfired, their armor failed to protect them, and their coordinated tactics fell apart as each warrior experienced reality differently. Outside, the nanofabricated army launched from Earth's surface. Millions of perfect soldiers created for one purpose: to reclaim humanity's homeworld. They swarmed the void-born ships, breaching hulls, and overwhelming defenses through sheer numbers and adaptability. On the command ship, Supreme Overseer Kalveruk watched in mounting horror as his invincible fleet began to falter. The humans' manipulation of the junction point had spread beyond the lunar facility, creating pockets of altered reality throughout the battle zone. In some areas, void-born weapons simply ceased to function. In others, the very structure of their ships began to degrade as molecular bonds weakened. "Retreat," he ordered, his voice thick with an emotion the Voidborn rarely experienced. "Fear. Recall all forces. We must regroup and approach this threat with." He never finished the sentence. The command ship shuddered as hundreds of thousands of nanomachines breached its central core, systematically disabling its systems. Back at the lunar facility, Alara watched the battle unfold on the holographic displays. The Voidborn fleet was in disarray, their carefully coordinated tactics falling apart as they faced an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. "They're retreating," she observed as the surviving Voidborn ships began to disengage, fleeing at maximum speed. "Not retreating," the Meridian corrected. "Regrouping. They will return with greater numbers. The Voidborn collective spans galaxies. This is merely one fleet." Alara nodded, having expected as much. "Then we need to make sure they can never threaten Earth again." She turned back to the Prometheus device, placing her hands on its pulsing core. The past days had shown her only glimpses of its true potential. Now it was time to fully embrace that power. "What are you planning?" the Meridian asked, its form shifting with what might have been concern. "A barrier," Alara explained. "Not a shield, not a weapon. A fundamental change to the nature of space around our solar system. A place where the Voidborn's technology simply cannot function." The Meridian's consciousness expanded as it grasped the implications. "You intend to create a permanent alteration to cosmic constants within a defined region of space. Such a change would require immense energy, possibly more than the junction point can channel." "Then we'll need to make the junction point stronger," Alara replied. "Arcturus, connect me to the nanofabricated units." Through the AI, Alara's consciousness linked with the millions of nanomachines now spread throughout the Earth-Moon system. Each unit was, in essence, a tiny computer capable of processing and transmitting information. Together, they formed a distributed network of unprecedented scale. "I need you all to focus on a single thought," she broadcast to the network. "Imagine a barrier around our solar system, a place where the laws of physics subtly shift, where the voidborn cannot exist as they are. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Millions of artificial minds joined with hers, their combined consciousness flowing through the junction point. The Prometheus device blazed with energy, its blue light expanding outward in a sphere that encompassed the entire facility. The Meridian watched in fascination as reality itself began to ripple and change. The junction point was no longer merely a connection between realities. It was becoming a forge for a new one. "You are exceeding the theoretical limits of junction point manipulation," it observed. "This should not be possible. Humanity specializes in the impossible." Alara replied, her voice strained with effort. The sphere of energy continued to expand, growing to encompass the moon, then Earth, then reaching outward toward the orbit of Mars. At its edge, space itself seemed to shimmer like a heat mirage, the boundary between the old reality and the new. On the retreating void-born ships, systems began to fail as they encountered this altered space. Their engines, dependent on specific quantum interactions, stuttered and died. Communication systems went silent. Life support systems struggled to maintain the atmospheric conditions the voidborn required. Supreme Overseer Kalvaruk, fleeing in a secondary command vessel, watched in horror as his mighty fleet was reduced to drifting hulks. For the first time in the collective's long history, they had not just been defeated, they had been fundamentally denied access to a region of space. The barrier stabilized, extending from the sun to just beyond the orbit of Pluto, a perfect sphere of altered reality, where humanity could rebuild without fear of voidborn interference. In the lunar facility, Alara collapsed to her knees, exhausted by the immense effort of reshaping reality on such a scale. The Prometheus device continued to pulse, but more softly now, maintaining rather than creating. "It's done," she whispered. The Meridian's form shifted closer. "What you have accomplished defies everything we believed possible. A species that was nearly extinct has not only survived, but has changed the fundamental nature of reality to ensure its continued existence." Alara looked up at the displays showing Earth, scared, damaged, but now secure behind an impenetrable barrier of altered physics. Already, the nanofabricated units were beginning their secondary function: reconstruction. Cities would rise again, fields would be replanted, and somewhere out there, the human survivors who had been taken as slaves would sense the change, would know that Earth was safe again. "We've bought ourselves time," she said, rising to her feet. "Time to rebuild, to grow stronger. And when we're ready, you intend to venture beyond the barrier." Alara nodded. The Voidborn enslaved hundreds of species before they came to Earth. All those beings deserve freedom too, and now we have the means to help them achieve it. The Meridian's form pulsed with what might have been approval. Then the cosmos is about to change in ways none could have predicted. The species that was thought defeated has not only survived, it has emerged with the power to reshape reality itself. As dawn broke over Earth for the first time in 30 years, without the shadow of void-born ships darkening its skies, Alara Chen looked out at the planet she had saved. The barrier shimmered at the edges of the solar system, a testament to what one human could accomplish with the right tools and enough determination. The Voidborn had made a fatal mistake. They had crushed humanity, driven it to the brink of extinction, but they had failed to extinguish the one thing that made humans truly dangerous: the ability to imagine a different world, and the will to make that imagination reality. They had thought humanity defeated. They were about to discover just how wrong they had been.